Welcome to 61D, the course where we teach you modern full-stack web development. My name is Aiden, and today we're going to be covering the basics of React. We're going to start off by giving a little bit of a conceptual overview and background on what React is and why you might want to use it. Then we're going to give you a crash course on some very basic HTML before talking about the structure of a React project, how we can break down our project into individual components, and how we can use JSX, which is just a specific way of writing JavaScript, to add interactivity to our application. And we'll cover more on interactivity and React state in the next lecture. Over the next two lectures, we'll use a dice roller application to demonstrate the principles of programming with React. You'll be able to create a die. So if I clear my existing one, I can create die 1, add die, and then it can have any number of sides. So I could have one 6-sided die and one 20-sided die. Oops. D20, add die, and then I can roll my die. So in this case, I rolled my 20-sided die and got a value of 8. Roll it again, get a value of 5. Could add another D20, so say D22, which could have 20 sides. Add die, and then I can roll both of them, get the total. So the total is 15 out of a max of 40. First die rolled 4, second die rolled 11. This is similar to something. This is essentially recreating the functionality of this rolladie.net website where you can add multiple die. So for instance, I could add 2 D20 die and roll them like so. So you will create your own version of it. Also important to note that we will not be properly styling this website. We'll cover CSS styling in lectures 5 and 6, but for now we're just covering how you can lay out all the individual parts of a website and how you can make it interactive. Today we'll just be creating this static display, and then in lecture number 4 we will add all the interactivity around adding die, adding dice, removing dice, rolling dice, clearing dice, and even persisting the state between refreshes. So if I have a couple rolls and refresh the page, all of our info will still be there. The reason to use React is that it allows us to break our website down into what are called components, which are, you can just think of as the core building blocks of a website. Anything can be a component, and you can create more complicated components out of smaller components. This is just the example from the React homepage. Right, you can see how we can define a little video card, which can be created out of our thumbnail, our information about the video itself, and then an interactive little like button. Then, once we take that building block, we can use data to render a list of videos, and we can reuse that building block 3 times, right? So here we have videos that we take in. This could be fetched from a server or something like that. We use JavaScript code right in the same spot as our HTML markup to reason about how we should operate. So for instance, this JavaScript code checks whether or not video should be singular or plural. So you can say 3 videos, but it would say 1 video. And then when you have that, you can then make your web page interactive, right? So we showed the little heart logo you can turn on and off, but you can also power something like a search. So I could search React and find only the videos having to do with React. There's a lot more background and context you need to fully understand React. However, the best way to learn it is just to dive right in and see it used in practice. And then we can explain some of the conceptual backgrounds as we actually start using stuff. So there's no starter code for this assignment. We will release, well, there's no starter code for this lecture. I will have the solution code in the description of the next video. We're going to start instead from a completely blank project. So what we're going to do to create a React project is we're going to say bun create vite, V-I-T-E, at latest. This is going to bring up our little CLI to create the project. We can name it whatever you want. In this case, I'm going to call it React Dice Roll. Then we need to select what framework we're using. In this case, it is React. We are going to select TypeScript plus SWC. And there we go. So we can follow this. We can cd into React Dice Roll and then open it up in VS Code. Before we actually can run this project, there's a few important files that we need to understand. The first one is the package.json file. This is going to exist in any React project and basically any Node.js project. So if you're just running a backend, if you're running any other framework, something like Vue, you're going to have a package.json. So what this does is it defines what are all of the dependencies required for you to run this JavaScript project. So in this case, in here, we have defined React and React DOM as dependencies. What that means is we can't run the project without having those dependencies installed within the project. So to install the needed dependencies, we can just run bun install. And what you'll notice is it created a node_modules folder. This is the actual code, all of the code that you need to make React run, right? Everything that is going to be happening under the hood, it's all defined under here. But this is a very large file, right? So it doesn't necessarily make sense to include the node modules specifically in your project when you push them up to GitHub. So instead, what we do is we just define what the dependencies are so that anytime you need to initialize a new project, right? Let's say we accidentally deleted this, you can just run bun install again and have your project configured. There are also specific dev dependencies you can specify, and that is anything that is not going to exist when your project is running, but only exist in your development environment. So for an example, TypeScript doesn't actually run in the browser. It only exists from a developer perspective. So therefore, we need it as a dev dependency, but not an actual dependency. Final thing within here is we have certain scripts that are predefined that we can run for the project. In this case, we're going to worry about the dev script, which will start our project. To run any of these scripts, all you need to do is say bun and then the name of the script. So in this case, bun dev, and it will start our project, which we can open up. So as you can see, we have our static website and a little bit of built-in interactivity, a little counter. And if we want to see a change, we can edit something in app.tsx. So we can go to source app.tsx, and we could, instead of saying Vite plus React, say hello world, save it. It's gonna hot reload and update right there. You'll notice also that the change we made, right, this little change, did not completely reset the whole page the same way that a refresh would, right? Our count was persisted. this is the key idea behind React, not just in the development environment, but also in the entire sort of built React project. React will identify, hey, where is a specific change occurring? And what subset of the entire page do I need to re-render to properly show that change, right? So in this case, clicking this button is only going to re-render this button. It's not going to re-render this text or either of these images. Let's take a look at the app.tsx file. It's the main file that we have currently that contains all the information about our project. You can see that what it is doing is it is tying together the three main pieces which create a website. We have our HTML, which are all of these individual tags. We've got div, a, image, etc. We have our CSS, which is defined in a separate file for now. This is providing all of the styling, which currently exists. So for instance, the thing that is making our background the certain gray color, all of the nice spacing and center alignment is defined with the CSS. And also we have JavaScript, which is being executed, right? This function is a JavaScript arrow function, which is storing the count and incrementing it. For instance, we could make this multiply by 2 instead. And then we go from 2, 4, 8, 16, etc. Right? So that is the idea behind React. In this one sort of contained environment, we can very easily use all those building blocks together and put it into a component, a single section of isolated code that has everything it needs, and then use that component somewhere else. So for instance, this app is technically not used in this file. We export it and then import it into our main.tsx, where we run it from higher up within the project. And then the actual entry point for our project is our index.html file, which has certain metadata about the page. But the main thing that it does is it has this script tag which runs main.tsx, which once it's built will be a JavaScript file, so we can run JavaScript within this HTML. Speaking of HTML, let's cover some of the most important tags which you will be using very, very frequently. To start, we can look at just what is used within this page. The most basic thing you might include is some text. For instance, we have hello world, which we could move to the top. Hello world is an H1, which just means that it is a header. You can also do H2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So let's show you the difference between size in an H1 and an H2. So that's our big H1, our small H2. Also, you'll notice that the closing tag is automatically getting edited as I edit the opening tag. That is the result of an extension that I have installed. If you want to check out our recommended extensions for the course, I will have them all linked down below. So that's basic header text. You can also have a P tag, which is paragraph text. So small body paragraph text, like so. And then if you want to have more specialized text, you can do other tags such as this code tag, which is showing you this nice monospace code font, which we can show an example of. Could say console.log hello. like so. All HTML tags have to have an opening tag and a closing tag. So in this case, we have our h1 opens up, and then the body of the tag, and then a slash before the closing tag. You can then nest tags within those, you can nest tags within tags. Our whole thing is nested. So for instance, we can have this code tag nested within our paragraph tag, as long as you have the opening and closing of the nested tag before the closing of the parent tag. There's also certain situations where you can have just a single tag that is both the opening tag and closing tag in one. So for instance, if you wanted a paragraph break, so let's say we wanted a break, this is opening break, closing break, right? Such that we put console.log hello on the same line. However, if we don't need to nest any content within this break, we can instead just write it like so, where we have break and then this closing slash at the end, such that this acts as both the opening tag and the closing tag. Next up, we have links and images. Links are created using this a tag. You say a, and then the prop you have to pass is href, which says where the link is going to, and then the destination. So for instance, if we click on this Vite logo, it brings us to the Vite docs. Saying target equals underscore blank will open it in a new tab. So if we were to delete that and try this again, it would redirect us directly instead of opening in a new tab. Images have both, they have the img tag. Normally they are self-contained. So like we talked about this break tag, because you don't necessarily wrap content within an image. The things you need are an image source. This can either be an image you have locally in your project. So in this case, we have this vite.svg. I think it's in assets. Is it in assets? Where is it? Vite.svg. Okay, so this is an SVG, but for example, React is also an SVG. So it's programmatic, but you can imagine we could have a PNG file, but regardless, this is local in our project. Or you could also have a URL. So for instance, if we have an image URL like this guy, then we could paste that in and we'd still have our Vite image that way. The other important thing to have is an alt text, which displays in case this URL can't load for any reason. So if there was a typo, get rid of the D, then it would show this alt text. The alt text is also important for screen readers and accessibility purposes. And there's many other things we'll cover throughout today's lecture, which are there so that it's easier for screen readers and other tools to be able to tell what is on a website, so that you can have a very accessible web that can be usable by everybody. Once we have some content that we want to display, so for example, we've got our headers and then the images, we need to find ways to group them. So as you can already see, the main tag that you use to just wrap a group of other tags is a div tag, which is just a division within a web page. In this case, we are grouping the images so that they can render separately on their own line horizontally, and then afterwards this button will render. If we were to get rid of the div, then get rid of that div, and then maybe also get rid of that div. Right, then these three would not be segmented. They would just kind of all be in a line. It's also important to know that although the div tag is the most commonly used tag for generally separating out sections of your code. There's many other tags which accomplish the same purpose and which also have a little bit more description of what is the thing you're actually grouping. So for instance, I could say that I'm going to have this be my header and then wrap my H1 and H3 in that. And the rest could be my body. Functionally, this does not provide any difference between using like a header tag versus a div tag. However, as we mentioned, for one, it makes your website more accessible so that screen readers and other things can better process it. Two, it's better for search engine optimization so that as Google is crawling your website, it can better tell what it is looking at and how it is generally organized. And three, it's also just better for working with other developers because they can look at your code and immediately tell how is this segmented. There's many other tags that are like this, and the term that we use to describe these tags, which don't necessarily have functional differences, are called semantic tags, or the process of using them is called semantic HTML. Final two tags we're going to cover are button tags and input tags. The button tag takes what is called an event handler. When some event takes place, so in this instance on click, you define some JavaScript action which says what you want to do. In this case, on click, we want to double the value of count, and then every time it is clicked, that action will take place. Buttons also normally nest and wrap some content that is normally going to be just the text of the button that says what the button is going to do. Final tag is an input tag. So we can say input. And normally here you don't wrap this. You have it just as an input like that. You can set a placeholder text. So we'll say hello. And the other important thing to do is define an input type. So your type can be any of these, right? You could say that it is just a standard text input. And if we do that, look over here, the CSS is all a little messed up. We can input text. You can also do a number input, which prevents you from typing in text, and you can only type in numbers. Along with the other few interesting ones, you can do a date input, which will let you have a little date picker, and a file input, which lets you actually upload a file. Those are little clips of the video. Finally, you can add a label for your input. So in this case, we want to say what the content of the label is. So we would say like that, and we'll say file input, like so. But we also need to directly associate this label with this input, again, for the purposes of things like screen readers and SEO and all of that. So for that, simplest thing to do is just give this input an ID property. So we can say ID equals, we could say profile upload or profile pic upload. And then here we would just say that this is HTML4 our profile pic upload. Like so. So again, you can't really see any difference there, but it is important to directly associate the label with your input.